Hello there, YouTube, and today I'm going to be answering 23 questions for GMs. These are by Zak S, and I'm going to leave a link to his blog below where they were originally posted. Some of my answers might be a little different because I play GURPS. Primarily, I run it or I play it, and so my perspective is going to be a little bit different. So I thought, maybe rather than the D&D centric gaming world that kind of exists out there, I'll give it from a different spin. So here we go. First question is, you had to pick a single invention in a game you're most proud of. What would it be? I guess I'm going to take single invention as invention of game mechanics. And one thing that I do as a GM is I incorporate new adventure seeds into the game subtly by using the news source of the time, or the news source of the world that they're in. If it's a fantasy or a lower tech setting, it's going to be newspapers that happen to be laying on the bar stool as they sit down at the tavern or whatever, or it's going to be the town crier as they're going from place to place buying new equipment. Well, what are we going to do next? As they're looking through the books and seeing what equipment they can get. Well, you guys all hear the town crier saying this and this, and in a higher tech setting, you can have the internet if it exists, or the galactic equivalent of the internet if it's a space setting, or if it's a starport, I'll have an announcer that comes on, well, as you guys exit your starship, or as you're meandering the passageways of the starport. I've found that it's a good way to introduce totally unconnected concepts into the game without breaking from the actual game itself and having an out-of-game moment. I was like, well, if you guys want to do this, it flows better, it's much more fun, it keeps people interested in the game, and it keeps table talk to a minimum also, which can be a bad thing. So my favorite invention would be, or my best invention, most proud of, would be essentially a random adventure seed generator that is totally underneath the framework of the game, and the players never see it. Question number 2. When was the last time you GM'd? 3 or 4 weeks ago. Not my proudest campaign, but some people talked me into it as a screw-around campaign. I ran an adventure where everybody made G.I. Joe characters from, if you remember, the old 80s, 90s cartoon and action figure series. They seem to enjoy it, though. I kind of get bored running it, but whatever. Question number 3. When was the last time you played? I guess played would be last time I GM'd too, but as a player, it would probably be at least a month or so ago, a week or two before I GM'd last. Question number 4. Give us a one-sentence pitch for an adventure you haven't run but you'd like to. The England, 5th century England, where the Romans have left, and there's still remnants of the church scattered about, and the old pagan religions are still very powerful. Stonehenge is still an active site, and these bloodthirsty hordes called Saxons have invaded England, and there's one man uniting England to stop them, and his name is King Arthur. It would be a magical fantasy setting, but in a real place, but deviate a little bit from history, obviously, with the magic involved. Let's see, next question, number 5. What do you do while you wait for players to do things? Usually I am interacting with another player. If somebody is buying equipment or re-spending character points or something, I'll make sure that other players, especially players that maybe are a little shy, not as outgoing, don't get in as involved. I like to use that opportunity to get them involved and make sure they feel that they've got something they can literally bring to the table. Number 6. What, if anything, do you eat while you play? Anything. I guess pizza is the classic staple for gaming, but fast food, or sometimes maybe get munchies beforehand, and chips, candy bar, soda. Do you find GMing to be physically exhausting? With the wrong group, I can find it mentally draining, but physically exhausting, not really. I don't get physically involved in running, but I'd say there were times where I had a good experience gaming, and you do kind of have a physical high or a mental high. You do have a positive energy about you, and usually the party does too. You all kind of feed off that. When things are just flowing, people are coming up with ideas, your characters are making progress and getting good experience, and I don't think physically exhausting would be something that happens, however. So next question, question number 8. What was the last interesting thing, to you anyway, that you remember a PC you were running doing? Probably the last time I did run, the other 2 players in the party, one, it was his first campaign, and the other one isn't a very active gamer, so he was also fairly kind of, well, he was new to the group system. And the premise was we were on a cruise ship that we had planned to rob. I was actually running 2 characters. One of them was a Japanese submarine captain. His role in the robbing of this cruise ship was he had the getaway vehicle. He was on the ship. He was on this cruise ship as just a Japanese guy on vacation, and so while the rest of the PCs were adventuring in the climax of the story, he was just waiting on the deck of the boat getting a lifeboat ready, because my other character was sneaking through the ship, placing demolition charges to damage the boat in such a way that it would slowly sink, and then we're going to raid, or my character was going to raid the main bridge so I could get access to the armory, destroy the radio, and the safe, and the lock boxes for the NPCs on the ship that were the wealthier NPCs that had jewelry and money that they had taken with them that they didn't want stolen, obviously. But the other 2 characters were distracting the first mate and the captain, and while this was going on, the rest of the ship was on a skeleton crew, and my character raided the bridge and basically single-handedly captured the bridge with himself and a Tommy gun, and ended up meeting up with the other 2 players in the captain's quarters, and without the demolitions, without the raiding of the bridge, I wouldn't have been able to rescue them. I wouldn't have been able to actually rob the thing, because the ship's sinking, so everybody's leaving, so we don't have people coming to look for us. People are trying to get off the ship. So blowing up a cruise ship to rob its vault and loot its armory was probably the most interesting thing I can remember doing recently. Question number 9. Do your players use your serious setting and make it unserious, or vice versa, or neither? Try not to let that happen. I try and set the campaign tone for the players themselves. If I don't think players are going to be capable of handling a serious game, then I don't introduce them to a serious campaign. There have been times where serious players start to get unserious and kind of change the tone of the game, but I try and set the tone for the players themselves, so I don't have to change my campaign around, and so I don't feel that I've done all that work for nothing when they do change your campaign on you. Question number 10. What do you do with goblins? That is a good question. Since I am not running D&D or a D&D derivative, my own fantasy setting is similar to your typical high fantasy settings, your D&D, your Lord of the Rings. There's the stock races, and so of course I have goblins. And what I have done is I've made orcs, goblins, and ogres all part of the same family. They all speak the same language. They're just all different offshoots of the same original race of creatures, and I use the word goblin interchangeably with orcs, but usually to maybe indicate a smaller race of orcs. Like the orcs or goblins, whatever you want to call them, in my world, for the most part, are kind of fit to the climate that they live in. There's orcs from the desert. There's orcs from the Arctic sort of and mountainous sort of areas of the map. There's temperate orcs, but I'll use I refer to them as ice goblins rather than snow orcs. One, it sounds better, but also they're much shorter. They're about 4 to 5 feet tall, whereas maybe the temperate dwelling goblins are give or take around 6 foot, or the ogres, which are 8 to 9 feet. So what do I do with goblins? I keep them kind of as cannon fodder, but they do have their own cultures. They do have their own distinct clans. When they interact with the PCs, usually it's going to be a combat setup, but there have been times that they've made alliances with orcs. And something I also do, which no one's given me any flack on, is in my game world, slavery does exist, and goblins are one of the few races that in civilized areas you can still keep as slaves. So I've changed the dynamic a little bit, but what I've found is it ends up that players will actually talk to the goblins instead of kill them first on sight at every chance they get to. Yes, they still treat them as cannon fodder, but I've given them enough diversity, and also they have their own kind of magic system and rituals that they use, so they're not always going to be cannon fodder. And when they do encounter a large group, there's enough variety in there that it'll make it a challenge as well as interesting. So next question, number 11. What was the last non-RPG thing you saw that you converted into game material, background, setting, trap, etc.? I guess it would have to be, as I mentioned before, G.I. Joe. As motivation, we watched some of the cartoons, and one of the potential players found a website that has a complete index of every toy and action figure they had ever made, and when they came out, how long they were in production, and different variants and all that stuff. And it even had, like, do you remember the file cards that were on the back of the, you remember G.I. Joes if you're old enough, that were on the back of the action figure package? Like, it had even that stuff listed on there, so there was enough. There's enough information to use as canon in the game world if I wanted to. So that's the last non-RPG thing that was converted for me. What's the funniest table moment you can remember right now? Shit. It might take me a second to think about that. Funniest table moment. That's the first thing that came into my mind, so I'm going to use it. Otherwise, I'm going to sit here thinking for another couple of minutes. I actually wasn't present at this particular gaming group, but it's the group that I had for many years gamed with, so I'd heard the story. And what had happened was the party was trying to subdue, I believe it was a blue dragon, whichever one has breathes the vapor cloud, has its breath weapon as a gas, and one of the players used the spell gaseous form as it was inhaling, and so the GM was nice enough. It's like, okay, if you roll only on a crit, will I allow you to survive? I rolled. He did a crit. Okay, finally. Well, I'll give you one dying action, and his action was to flick his flint and steel. Okay, I'll let you roll, and if you crit, I'll make it happen. Crits again. Okay, roll damage, and with damage he crit a third time, and this dragon that was supposed to destroy the entire party was actually blown up from the inside at a loss of only one player. So the GM was a little disheartened that he actually let that go past, but of course, you know, he said, well, if you roll, I'll let you. And it's not very fun to go back on, at least as a player, have the GM go back on your word. So blowing up a dragon from the inside by accidentally getting breathed into it because you're a gaseous cloud as well, and then flicking your flint and steel, probably the funniest thing I can think of off the top of my head. So there you go. Next question. What was the last game book you looked at, aside from things you referenced in-game, and why were you looking at it? I was rereading the main book, and I was rereading the main book because a player in my group was looking at running, and I just thought it wouldn't hurt for me to kind of reread certain sections of the main GURPS book again, just so if he has any questions, or maybe if there's something I had forgotten, that I could point out to him and help him. So that was the last book I read. Who's your idea of the perfect RPG illustrator? I don't know a single illustrator offhand. I know some of the Rips books actually have some really interesting art to them. Illustrator. I'm going to go with the Brothers Hildebrandt. They're known for doing highly realistic paintings of especially the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and Middle-earth lore. They make an excellent coffee table book, of course, but if I could have somebody that was going to illustrate my ideas, I think I would pick them. Next question. Does your game ever make your players generally afraid? Not really. I did run a horror thing one time but one of my players didn't quite take it as seriously as I wanted to, and I think that kind of cut it. Have my players been afraid for their characters? Yes, on occasions, but I would not say that I ever do anything that sets the mood to make it genuinely frightening. I think that would, if I want to do that stuff, sitting around the table in a well-lit room with bags of chips on the table would probably not be it. I'd have to change the setting and really invest into it, a darker room that's maybe possibly made up and has props to kind of set the mood. Lit candles rather than use natural lighting, and probably some sort of ambient sound. And you can get on YouTube and find spooky forest for 10 hours or whatever, and that sort of thing would probably set the mood. I think I'd have to invest a lot more into the energies I put into the game to actually make it generally frightening, because real genuine fear is a hard thing to make people believe when there's nothing to really fear and they consciously know it. But it could be interesting. Next question, number 16. What was the best time you ever had running an adventure you didn't write? Ever. I honestly can't think of a time where I ran an out-of-the-box adventure. One I've played, though, that I did enjoy was the GURP supplement, Zombie Town USA. Me and another guy that had always been the GM in our group, normally the two of us took turns, convinced one of the players to run this one-of adventure. And we totally went off base. It was supposed to be a realistic modern setting with scientifically created zombies and not magic or voodoo zombies, so realistic zombies. And we purchased things out of the book. Our equipment was a little bit more than I think the game designers had planned for, and it was supposed to be ran with a party from anywhere from 4 to 6 people, but it was just the two of us. But when we held off the wave of zombies, which is like 7 of them, with AR-15s, we knew at that point the game had changed dramatically. But it was fun. We kept the GM on his toes, and it was one of the few times that I actually got to play as a player with that particular friend of mine. It was a good time. Sometimes the less orthodox is actually more fun because you've never done it before. So yeah, Zombie Town USA. That was actually a fun little adventure and worth the $1.50 I paid for the supplement. Next question, number 17. What would be the ideal physical setup to run a game in? Ideal physical setup. Well, I guess I kind of touched on that one in a couple questions ago. But ideal physical setup, a room large enough with a 8x8 gaming table. I'm the type of person that actually likes to use miniatures as much as possible, not just for dungeon hacks, but I also do wargaming, so I've got terrain for hills and rivers and trees and that kind of stuff. Players don't mind using the miniatures in a dungeon, but I think it's a fresh approach when you get them out of the dungeon and they're on the open plain, or in the forest or at a crossroads or something. And there's actually trees and creatures that are in miniature, and it has a visual, realistic look to it. So big room, good sized table, and one wall would be nothing but books, another wall would be all the different containers that would have the terrain, the trees, the miniatures, and comfortable seats, very comfortable seats. Folding chairs don't work that well. Your ass falls asleep eventually. So, and probably a mini fridge too, and well ventilation, because I know most of the people I game with actually smoke a lot. I think it kind of slows down the game when everyone has to go outside for a smoke break. Yeah, that would be the ideal. Also have a computer connected to the internet on hand for the GM, so you can have things like ambient music, or if you need to find a video for whatever reason, or a particular sound. If you have notes on the computer, I use my computer to keep notes and keep things organized, but not have become a distraction. I think that would also be nice. Next question. If you had to think of two of the most disparate games or game products that you like, what would they be? Two completely different game products, and why? That is a good one. First one is going to be GURPS. I like GURPS. I did the video before about why I think it's the best system. I like the balance. I like that you have limitless possibilities. But on the other end of the spectrum, I'm actually going to go with Warhammer 40K. I know that's not purely a gaming thing. I know it's more a wargaming thing rather than a role-playing thing. But their game, it has nothing to do with balance. It's very over the top. It has an epic feel to it. All the lore, the books, the video games, the non-core material to it still maintains that epic tone to it. But for some reason I like it. It's kind of this weird world. I like the fact that it's so far in the future that humanity has colonized so many places they can't even count anymore, and you have other races that really don't even make sense. Like how the hell did orcs figure out how to get off a planet? Like, where do they come up with the technology to fly into outer space? You don't know, and it suspends logic. It stands in the face of everything that GURPS upholds, but I can draw inspiration from that. It's a very rich game world with lots of ideas to draw from. So question number 19. If you had to think of the most disparate influences overall on your game, what would they be? That's kind of a hard one, since I'm not a D&D player, I'm a GURPS player, so rather than incorporating, you watch the Blade trilogy or something, you want to do something a little different with vampires. On GURPS, I could just make a Blade world for them to interact in. But probably the most disparate influences would be the total ridiculousness of and the unrealistic fashion of the Fallout world, and as an amateur historian, I would have to say that my understanding of American world history, actually, and I'll incorporate that into games. Like, I've done an Old West campaign at one point that was very historical, but whereas you have the Fallout universe, which I love its retro themes. I love its classic music. But I also like the fact that it's just different enough from our world that you know it's not our world. It's just one of a theoretical future or even a theoretical past. And the way radiation functions in that world is beyond all science. Radiation, to what we know about it, can't create super mutants. It can't somehow sterilize you and make you immortal at the same time as in the case of the ghouls, but it makes for an interesting story, so I enjoy it. Next question, as a number 20, as a GM, what kind of player do you want at the table? What kind of player? Ideally, I want a player that also has GM before. They might not GM a lot, but they know it from different points of view, so they understand that everyone gets a turn at the table, not to interrupt people. They understand the game mechanics. They understand the point of what gaming is. You don't need to be constantly over their shoulder looking at, well, I want to do this with my character, so how do I do that? They have the books available and they have the understanding of the system well enough that they don't need to be babysat. So ideal player for me is a player that's also a GM and understands the difference between the two. They tend to be a lot more independent and also come up with some of the best ideas too, that not just from another player perspective, but also as a GM, it keeps you on your toes and it keeps it interesting too. Sometimes the concepts that my players have come up with, especially in things like my fantasy setting, where I just gave them a big map and had them start in one location, let them know it was kind of around the map, and just let them go. And when they'd ask for, well, where's a place like this? We create new things on the map, or even in one instance, a player had founded a new city, which obviously made a new mark on the map. And that's something I never really expected, but that's what you can get from a player that is more involved in deeper understanding of the game mechanics, and GMs tend to be that sort of person, I think. Number 21, what's a real-life experience you've translated into game terms? Probably my understanding of firearms. I am a gun collector. I go shooting regularly. I've fired off a variety of different guns, of course shotguns and pistols and rifles, but automatic weapons and military type weapons. I've shot different AK and AR-15 variants, most of them at semi-auto, but it still gives you an understanding of how the recoil really works and being familiar with just something as simple as changing out a magazine. But I've also shot numerous older style weapons, particularly black powder. So I will use my understanding of that to give people a more realistic understanding of the way weapons work. I've also even on several occasions fired Civil War era cannons, and the cannon, the black powder cannon basically works the same way it did when it was invented up until shortly after the Civil War. You have a long tube, gunpowder, projectile, and then you have something, the touch hole that either you light a match or you have a primer that explodes inside the powder and sends it out. They all essentially function in a similar way. The only difference is the ignition. But understanding how much smoke is really caused by that, you might have in a game world that uses black powder, which actually my fantasy setting does. On one occasion, somebody threw a bunch of Molotov cocktails at a group of guys, dwarven grenadiers. They all had short little carbines, a powder horn, a gunpowder, and they also had clay grenades, like a clay body with pieces of metal inside, and then a gunpowder core with a fuse. And somebody had thrown a Molotov cocktail at them and started these guys on fire. Didn't realize what was actually going to happen, but it started a chain reaction and actually made a massive explosion in the middle of this battle and put a hole in the enemy line. And but the area was also saturated with smoke. The enemy couldn't see who was coming at them because there's so much smoke. Most people watch too much Hollywood or play too many video games, so they don't comprehend the level of smoke. And it's also a slower burning powder too. If you're not familiar with its functions, you'll just think that you can pour out the stream of gunpowder and set the keg down like they do in the cartoon and light it, and away she goes. And it's not how it works. But I use my understanding of firearms to give people more realistic and sometimes give people options they might not have considered to flesh out the game world a little bit more. Next question, number 22. Is there an RPG product that you wished existed but doesn't? That's kind of a hard one. As I've said numerous times so far, I am primarily a GURPS player for the simple fact that I don't need to wait for somebody else to come up with the product for me. It gives me the formulas right there, and I can do the King Arthur thing, or I can do World War II, or the Old West, or the Steam West, as it actually was called, because it was a Steam Tech setting, or even do Stone Age or Bronze Age early civilizations with a very strong magical aspect to it. I don't need to rely on technology. We have a magic-oriented game, or we can have the same set of rules, and I can no magic, no psychics, or maybe it's in the distant future and their psychics are more and more common as population expands and expands. But if there was one product that I did want, I put a lot of energy into making a Fallout campaign, but I would actually like to see a authorized version of Fallout through GURPS. I think that would be, that just tickled me pink. Last question, number 23. Is there anyone you know who you talk to about RPGs that doesn't play, and how do those conversations go? Most of the people that I talk to are either current players or in the past have been players. I actually don't talk to most people about it that don't have some familiarity with gaming. People that don't play Dungeons and Dragons, I'm sure most of you have found that you mention it and their first reaction is that's really awkward, or I've heard of that because I watched what's that fucking show? Big Bang Theory. Yeah, I don't watch TV. Yeah, I don't want to sit around and watch a bunch of people talk about how they play D&D. I don't have that time, so I'm going to go actually do it. Weird, I know. But yeah, most people I've found don't care or think it's silly or boring, and I don't talk to them about it. They also don't, even if they might not think it's weird. I don't think the people that don't play tend not to have that level of creativity. It's one of the reasons they don't play. So I'm not going to go ask them for GMing advice or something like that. And if I do have a RPG question or something I want to talk to somebody who doesn't play RPGs about, I generally don't phrase it in, well, I'm playing this role-playing game and I need to know how much sand a dump truck can hold, or whatever it is. That's not something I've ever done, but that'd be kind of the non-connecting game world example. I would just say I'm curious about something, or how does an engine work, or asking a pilot, like how hard is it, or how long does it take maybe to come up with a flight plan or something like that. If it's non-connected, but I want the information for a game, I don't usually tell the other person. If they ask, I'll tell them. But I've found that people that don't play either, give you strange looks and think you're weird, or they watch The Big Bang Theory and I saw that on the TV, and they think that's how it goes. So there we go. Those are my 23 answers to 23 questions. Just keep the thread going, comment, reply, or do your own 23 questions. Answer them as best you can. Post a video. Look forward to hearing from you.